Well, hi, hello, good morning, paradigm shifters, wherever you are in the world. So grateful that you're being here. With this Paradigm Shifters is a growing global community, Matt. And we got started in 2020. And we've been going every Tuesday, Transformation Tuesday since then, where we're dedicated to shift and uplift the planet. Let's take a shift and uplift the planet. And every month we have a topic. And this month of February 2023, our topic is acceptance. So I was thinking, I've been following my friend, Matt Heineman, on Facebook, and thought, wow, this is the perfect person to come in and talk about this acceptance and his process. So let me tell you a little bit about Matt. And I met you down in Wimberley, Texas. And I just want to tell you something about you and your family that so inspired me and still does, of your conscious connection within. And I just love your parenting and everything I know and have seen you guys. So Matt Heineman is a teacher of metaphysics, Buddhism, and mystical Christianity. And Matt lost his wife to cancer in 2021 and is raising his 3 children in Colorado. So he teaches in a tradition of New Thought about the application of nonviolent communication practices and the benefits of insight meditation to living a good life. So Matt, I would love, first of all, come in and tell us where you're coming from, and a little bit about that word acceptance and maybe how you've applied it. Maybe you could give us some insights about how maybe we can do some acceptance work in our lives.
Oh, what a great invitation. Thank you. And I guess before I get started, I'm grounded, home based here in Colorado, land of the Ute and the Apache. It's snow on the ground season. Everybody's usually hunkered inside. I'm outdoors, grateful to be outdoors. I'm actually standing at the spot that I conveyed the news to my kids that their mom was dying. I'm here trying to ground myself in some energy, deep energy of acceptance, and place and location and people and community. It's all connected. But what you mentioned, and I think it's no small charge, the mission of this group to uplift, to shift and uplift, which you mentioned about that you recognized in me, that this connection to the inner, the inner work. I think when we talk about acceptance, it's all inner work that we're talking about. I mean, that's where I start with just that word. It may be that some of us relate to acceptance from other models like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's, sort of death and dying, and all of her work on grief had acceptance kind of as a final stage in the grief recovery process. It's an arrival point for some people because life is, filled with adversity. How do we get to that place? And there's other models of metabolizing negative emotions. How do we just accept the things around us that are, how do we just accept what is, whether it's people or situations? That's where I come from with acceptance. Is that in concurrence with kind of what we're talking about?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. I'll tell a little story about, I was in my middle 30s, middle-aged 30s when I met Santa, and she had already a teenage son. I didn't have any kids at the time, and her son Isaac was 13, and we had just started dating. And he's in this phase of rebellious teenage, and I end up marrying his mom and become his stepdad. And so he lives with us until around 18, when he takes his GED from Catherine and Porter there in Wimberley and leaves school. But to live with a teenager in those 5 years was just super intense. We had just found unity, And nonviolent communication came into my life at that time as a practice, more than just a teaching, as a way that you can work with, in this case, people that are hard to understand around their needs and wants. And it really is kind of what kicks off this discussion for me about that practice, is using it to understand and check in with what was oftentimes confusing and things I didn't understand, but I had to accept that to marry his mom was to accept, the fate of living with a teenager, not my son, and raising him as a son. So there started just this path of the need for recognition on how to be at peace with my own choices. And that's, I don't know, that's a good, there's other things I want to say about grief and its connection to acceptance, but grief didn't really come into my life as a connection to acceptance until more recently. And in the last 5 years, I've lost mom, dad, wife to cancer. That stepson now lives on the streets. He's 27 now. Don't know what to call him. He's not my stepson. He calls me on Christmas. That's when we talk to each other. But there's a lot of acceptance around grief and loss at this phase of my life. And so acceptance, some loss and some grief has to go all the way down to the soul just to be dealt with. And, losing a significant other is that kind of soul work. And I'm learning that grief there's a lot of different kinds of grief. People dealing with gender identity have disenfranchised grief that people don't even recognize. There's vicarious grief. There's like variations of what we call the one word. And now I'm starting to see acceptance is like that too. There's variations of acceptance, self-acceptance, when we talk about this other level inner work, even self-transcendence, there's acceptance of our own flaws and foibles and, the embarrassment that comes with that. And then it's almost like many versions of grief with each one of these needs to arrive at acceptance. It's a process. And so grief has kind of taught me not to, it sort of shows up in your life as a destructive force and it takes things from you. It's sort of perceived that way. But as I started to see, it's really a healing process to arrive back at acceptance, which is really where we start, the journey to begin with. It's kind of turned on its head for me. I'll pause there and just check in. I know there's more I can say, but.
No, this is perfect. This is perfect. And as a parent, tell us a little bit, if you would, like, because you're parenting now these three beautiful children, and where does the nonviolent communication, I really am curious about that, come in?
Yeah, I have a story I can kick that one off too, because it's similar to the last one in that children sometimes are hard to read. Nonviolent communication starts with the premise. Marshall Rosenberg, who wrote the book Nonviolent Communication and has a subsequent book, did a lot of work internationally on peace and reconciliation, and so he's quite well known. But this work applied to parenting, it starts with the premise that almost all human communication is an attempt to get an unmet need met. That's his, to hang on a phrase that he, sort of works around. It's unmet needs. So as my 5-year-old and 8-year-old deal with loss and grief, or even challenges at school, or even the difficulty of having 3 kids and only one parent to go around, it's sometimes very complex communication. But I break it down to what are the needs that are trying to be met here when I don't understand. And Wheeler is 8 years old. He's experiencing bullying on the playground for the first time. He's in 3rd grade, and a kid refers to his dead mom on the playground until he melts into a puddle. And the next day in the morning does not want to go to school. Doesn't tell me the story, just tells me that his tummy hurts. I go to this system that I have, and I've got it as something I can demonstrate. It's it's just a set of cards. Let me flip my phone around. I'm going to finish this story with a show and tell. And I have to take a background off of my video. Let me see if I know how to do that from this screen. Background and effects. None.
Oh, there it is.
Now you can see the snow on the ground.
Wow.
On the flip screen. So it's a deck of cards. It's needs. It's a series of words that you can identify as human needs. And Wheeler gives me an explanation of his tummy hurting, and I knew there was more to it. It's not just that he was uncomfortable. I could tell, but I just couldn't tell what was wrong. And so I laid out a bunch of cards. This is an example of kind of cards I laid out. And he started pulling fear from the emotional set. And then he went to this and he pulled hopeless from this deck of cards. And an 8-year-old who expresses hopelessness, and I asked him if he knew what it meant, and he told me he did. It gave me a chance to go and talk to the principal about, I have now a third grader who I can describe his situation, but I can also give you, out of his words, what his experience is. And it was the feeling that he didn't have enough teacher to student support on the playground to make him safe when bullies are acting out towards him. But that gave us a chance to have a discussion that wasn't just about his upset tummy, right? The way that a 8-year-old would describe his sensation. And so I think I'm onto something when I use this as even a personal check-in opportunity, in that the somatic experiencing, it's kind of a new way to experience self, through touch and the body. I touch a card and I can tell this has got some resonance with me. And so I facilitate my own kind of unmet needs by going through a card deck, trying to figure out, what's got resonance with me today. And maybe as just a touchback on grief and the stages of grief, that last stage in the Kubler-Ross model of depression, to go from depression to acceptance, just to find a step, just to figure out one step to take each day. This kind of deck of cards, this process, I could find a priority that was about my own inner sense of what needs I needed to meet. And I did it on a regular basis through a pretty challenging time as a practice. So I know it has a way of revealing not just what is, but what I'm at tension with, and what needs to happen for me to reconcile with what is. And that's kind of my practice. That's what I was describing to you, as I do have something I do on a semi-regular basis that is for some folks easy to access, and because it's really just about you and what your situation is. It's also very personal and interpersonal.
Wow. That's great. So wow. So that's as a parent and a single dad. So what else can you tell us, like, as a tool that I want to hear more about those cards and the feeling that comes on it. For me, that's brand new. I would love to hear more.
Well, it goes back to our church, and I can describe how it was introduced to me and how I use it, some of the other technology that accompanies it, and including some of the science and background that I think, maybe I introduced this a different way, but Buddhism and the Dalai Lama are popular topics around self-help, but something he's doing recently is revealing that neuroscience and our hard sciences are proving that meditation works, for lack of a better word, but it improves our well-being. And they're calling it kind of the fourth turning of Buddhism, where he's invited, in a very vulnerable sense, if science refutes these 3,000 years of practices, we'll try something new. But he's inviting science at the level of neurobiology in, and they're refuting the claims that this is not accessible to everybody, because it is. It's something anybody can do, right? Meditation helps, period. So there are times when I want to say it's simple stuff, like just sitting with what's hard to hold on to or was painful, and it's just nothing more than sitting with it, because a lot of the challenge is, what are we sitting with other than pain? My brain likes to latch on. What is it that's causing the pain? Why? Where did it come from? And then because I don't like, suffering, stewing in my own juices, what can I do about it? And this system is very sort of practical, but it goes to this neurobiology level. It came to our church as an introduction through a spiritual teacher. Rita Marie Johnson has a book called The Connection Practice. That's where I bought her cards, her website, The Connection Practice, and I can send you a link so that you can promote it, or she can get credit for where I purchased my materials. She introduced her book, and she introduced the heart math combined with this nonviolent communication. She has licensed from both of those institutes, and heart math in terms of the polyvagal nerve and its effect on heart rate can influence heart-mind coherence. How in touch with our pain are we? Is our pain coming from a thought? Is it coming from an unhealed wound in our heart? It can kind of be this whole discussion that opens that up. But the truth is, we can detect our heart rate variability. And when we feel those emotions of anxiety, we can see it go up. And when we feel those feelings of peace, we can see it go down. So we can raise that vibrational level at will. And we can detect it through biofeedback. And then we can put that on display. And I was the guinea pig. I don't know what this was, 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, with the giant overhead display and people from the congregation watching me get my earlobe attached, one of these little sensors. And just the act of sitting in the chair in front of an audience like that, my heart rate, noticeably, you could detect the anxiety going up. And she facilitated through this process of an inner check-in to get that metric that we could all see to go down. And it was very much that connection for me that sold me on, biofeedback, heart rate disturbances affecting mental clarity through feelings like anxiety, and that kind of stuff was just new, but it was enough to sink in for me. So some of the ancillary technologies, she's got little apps that you can put on your phone and little devices you can wear on your, wrist or lapel or ear, to give you your own biofeedback loop into your inner dimensions that we often can't see,
So it takes you into yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's, and you said
or into your experience, which oftentimes I would say my language is filtered through the self. The way I now see it is that our experience, we have to go through the self to even describe our experience. But sometimes we can detect what our experience is and without having to pass through the self. I don't know. This is where the mystical part of the journey sort of turns up. You've got to have an experience like that where there is, prior to self, an experience.
I just what's going on, down here.
Yeah.
You probably saw that the trees snapped, right?
Yeah, frozen everywhere. Life inundated life.
Yeah, and there's that pain listening to the trees cry, as I would say.
Yeah, it's a collective suffering.
Yeah, and for me, like wanting to run away and hide from that, or going out and feeling it. And I think you said that the feeling it and getting clear on that, I'm not too sure what I'm saying here, but not trying to figure out what's happening, but being accepting of what's happening, knowing that we're all part of this life. Does that make sense?
I think that willingness is the key to everything we're talking about. The willingness to experience the pain that seemingly the unsentient being in our world that's dying is creating inside. Like we have to be willing to experience those sensations. That's what I think the secret to acceptance actually is that whole willingness part. What you're saying about trees, and it equates to loss, but it also has a Zen koan around it, like the tree in the woods that doesn't have a listener, right? When it falls, this koan, So this Zen tradition of introducing perplexing ideas to show us the limits of the mind has a phrase called a koan, and there's a Zen koan around, if the tree in the woods that falls doesn't have any ears to hear it, does it actually make a sound? It's just a perplexing way to describe what I think the intersection between what you were saying and I'm saying is that self gets mingled into the sound. If we don't hear it through suffering ears, it's just water and the weight of water and the material of the wood. You know, it's a life cycle between hydrology and ecology, and it's not a human concern. But when you hear it with a sensitive heart, an open heart to the pollution that's going on our planet, the way that people are insensitive to natural systems and thus, disrupt them, it feels like wildfire is tragic for the ecology, but it's really not tragic. It's what we hear filtered through ourselves, is that's where that tragedy comes from. And this is, I don't know, Santa's cancer diagnosis was actually 10 years ago. We knew that she had cancer for over 10 years. And so to sit with suffering of an inevitable loss, it's a different kind of sitting. And that's why I say there's different kinds of grief than just loss. There's anticipatory, what might we lose to global climate change? What might our kids lose? What might the next generation lose to global climate change is palpable in today's society as an expression of, resistance, not accepting how things are. And so it's both personal and, transpersonal, this work that you're talking about.
Oh yeah, and it's ongoing and it's global. So
Yeah, yeah.
if you could give our community one like gleam of tool, something that you, I don't want to say grab onto, but something that you use on a daily basis to keep us going when we get there, what would that be? Something.
It's a morning check-in. I think morning routines are key. Building habits. If we're in, so the opposite of acceptance might be stuck. Right. Maybe a way to define how to get unstuck, or what to do when we find ourselves stuck. Morning routines and habits and rituals are key. We don't default to what we know. We default to our systems, our habits. So building a habit of morning reflection when we're stuck. And I do it through journaling, and I do it through these cards sometimes, but it's an intentional inner check-in. What am I feeling?
How have you taught your kids about the check-in? Are they?
We do checkouts. And I haven't quite revealed the need for inner space because they're kids.
Uh-oh, I think you froze. Oh, I hope you're not coming back.
Did we lose each other?
There, you're back. Yes. Now you were talking about the kids at the beginning.
Yeah. No, I was saying we do checkouts instead of check-ins. My kids don't quite have all the internalized sense of shame and guilt that parents and adults do, is what I was sharing. And so at the end of the day, it's always what we're grateful for. So that gives them a chance to see, inside what happened good during the day, because there's nothing that changes negative feelings, better than gratitude. I think it's Meister Eckhart says, if we only know one prayer, it's thank you, right? It's gratitude. So this is what we do at the end of the day. And if you ask, my kids, they have just a process of the end of the day, checking in with what happened good. And the oldest says it's because after losing his mom, he doesn't want to waste a single day. And that's a really, special gift. The death can touch us with a sense of urgency around life, and, reconciling our problems and coming to terms with what is. So we do a checkout.
Oh, I think we lost you again. I think it'll come back. Just coming back in. And I love it. There it is. Go ahead, Matt. You're back.
Oh, I was just saying we do a checkout instead of a check-in, but it's the same kind of thing. Check out your insides, see what's going on. What are you grateful for?
Okay, one more thing, and is like we as a community, I love it. I want to go back and just watch this and glean from your experience. But what is it that we can hold for you as a community? What would you love, Matt? Because we are a powerful community, global. In fact, we're all in 56 countries right now. And so what would you love to have us hold for you and your beautiful family?
I'm a legacy carrier right now. My wife and I started a lot of youth retreat programming that I want to continue to build upon. I think there's a lot of interventions we can make as adults, but it's really this age range that we felt most compelled to be around: teenagers, kids kind of coming of age, between the loss of innocence and the acceptance of adult responsibilities. We would do retreats where you get a chance to meet with your peers in a heart space and talk about these kinds of things we talked about today. And I think it's just transformative. It's just the intervention we need when they're being bullied and making big decisions about relationships and life choices and college or not college and work and independence, all those kinds of things. So if we can continue to support youth retreats in some way, that's the legacy I'm carrying, and I'll kind of share ideas on that with you if you send it out as a as a request.
We would love it, love it, love it. It's so great. Well, so here we go. We're going to send some energy up to you. Wow. Yes. And the generation, and you and your generation, and the generations you touched, and the generations yet to be born. So here you go, Matt. Got that in the snow?
I did.
Thank you so much for being with us. I'm so grateful for you and all.
Oh, I'm honored and touched that you invited me. This is great.
Amen. Amen.